Viviana, are you going to do the Facebook?
Yes, I did.
You did. Okay, great. Okay. I'd like to welcome everybody. My name's Dr. Elena Rios, and this is for the National Hispanic Health Foundation. We are having our clinical research webinar, How to Engage Pediatric Hispanic Patients and Families in Clinical Trials. And we have two outstanding guests that I will introduce in a minute. But first, we have some housekeeping. All participant microphones will be muted. Please feel free to type your questions into the Q&A box for the panelists to address during our Q&A session at the end of the hour. Please fill out the short post-webinar survey that will be emailed out after the event and also shown as a QR code at the end of the slides. Recording will be housed on the NHHF website, which is nhmafoundation.org, and also sent out 1 week after the event. We encourage you to use the Q&A box so that we can use the chat box with our staff in case there's any internal issues, technology. Next slide, please. We also offer CME credits for doctors and other health professionals from the Amedco company to the National Hispanic Health Foundation, and it's 1 hour of AMA credit. Next slide. So the objectives today are to understand the importance of diversity and inclusion in pediatric clinical trials, specifically focusing on engaging Hispanic patients and families. Number 2 is to understand barriers and challenges faced by Hispanic patients and families in accessing and participating in pediatric clinical trials, including cultural, linguistic, socioeconomic, and structural factors, lack of understanding of clinical research and processes, understanding the historical and cultural factors that contribute to mistrust of Hispanic families to clinical research. And number 3, to understand strategies and best practices, communication strategies addressing misconceptions about clinical trials, and building trust. Next slide. So the National Hispanic Health Foundation, our mission is to improve the health of Hispanics in the United States by promoting education and research and advocating for policies that address the unique health needs of the Hispanic population. And we do seek to reduce health disparities and ensure equitable access to health care. And that is our website, nhmafoundation.org. And let me just mention that this session is the last session with our sponsor named AMGEN that we've been very happy to work with. We've done a great service, I think, to finding doctors and others interested in clinical trials that we have recruited for the AMGEN training sessions that they're involved with. And we're also very happy to announce that we have another sponsor. Next slide, I think we might have the new sponsor on the next slide. No, not yet. The National Center for Hispanic Health Research is our place at the foundation that is where our webinars are housed. The mission is to understand and address the unique health needs of Hispanics with an unwavering commitment to fostering health equity through education and awareness. One of the main objectives is to elevate the prominence of Hispanic physicians and other researchers in clinical research within the community. With a steadfast focus on advancing research, education, and advocacy, the NCHHR is poised to lead transformative initiatives that promote the health and well-being of Hispanics across the nation. Next slide. And again, these are just part of what we're already doing. We've been in operation for 3 years. We have a registry now of about 3,000 Hispanic physicians who are PIs in clinical trials across the country. We have an education program where we are developing webinars and also toolkits and other resources that will be on our website this year. And we have a mentorship program that we are planning for next year, for 2025, to start developing the connection between medical students, especially, and maybe even pre-med students who would like to have an experience working with a mentor who's a researcher already to better increase motivation to think about a research career in your medical practice or in a clinic or even in academics. Next slide. Oh. So the About Equitable Breakthroughs in Medicine Development, EQBMED, is our new sponsor, and we're very happy to work with Yale School of Medicine, who is the lead on the coalition, Morehouse School of Medicine also, Vanderbilt Health, and the RCMI Coordinating Center, which is at Morehouse. This Equitable Breakthroughs in Medicine Development is a pilot project supported by pharma. And it's very important to realize that we need to do pilot projects to better understand how to have medical practices and included that are in communities of color, in underserved areas. And the focus of this pilot project is going to be in the southeastern United States. So we're very happy to be a part of it and to help increase awareness. If any of you out there are in the Southeast, please let us know. We'd love to include you in our reports to the EQBMED. Next slide. The ecosystem includes sites and communities. The clinical trial sites, they've just announced 4. They're hoping to get up to 10 within the next year. The partners are community-based, faith-based, and professional partners. And we are included in the professional partners as National Hispanic Health Foundation. And I might add the National Hispanic Medical Association is also a partner. We work closely with them. And our sponsors really are to collaborate with sites to shape clinical protocols, to have a more inclusive clinical research program, and to host trials aligned with community priorities. So it's a very comprehensive approach to developing DEI within clinical trial world. Next slide. So our first speaker is Dr. Claudia Espinoza. She is an associate professor of pediatrics and in the Division of Pediatric Infectious Disease at the University of South Florida. Claudia, I'm going to hand it over to you.
Thank you, Dr. Rios. First of all, I really want to thank the organization for inviting me to participate today. I think that I really believe that the way that we are going to advance research in populations that are of different background is really training others to do this right. Next. Okay, I do have some conflict of interest that I have to disclose, obviously, because I have been doing a lot of these clinical trials research. Then I have worked with many organizations, many sponsors, and I have all of them are there. Next. And today I really want to make sure that the audience understand the importance of diversity and inclusion in pediatric clinical trials and discuss some of the barriers and challenges that are faced by the Hispanic patients and their families in accessing and participating in pediatric clinical trials. Also, I would like to explore some strategies and communication best practice to address misconceptions and build trust in clinical research. Next. So what does this mean, closing the diversity gap? Which is the diversity gap in research? And I want to start with this because maybe many of you are very aware of this, but maybe some are not. The Hispanic population comprise about 20% of the United States population. But when we look into organizations that are looking at or doing clinical research, for example, the National Cancer Institute, we realize that only 10% of the participants in clinical trials in cancer research are really Hispanic or Latinos. If we go to another organization, for example, the FDA, we notice that only 4% of the participants are reported that are Hispanic or Latinos. So as we all can imagine, it will be really hard for researchers to develop unique, culturally and environmentally appropriate novel treatments for the Hispanic population. As many of you know, there are some diseases that are either presented or just they manifested differently depending on the background and the racial and ethnicity of the patient. Some other diseases that occur more in Hispanics and other ones that never occur and we see it in other populations. So it's very important to develop specific trials for them. Also, decreasing the gap of diversity will promote healthcare equity and reduce those disparities in healthcare outcomes, which is at the end what we really want. Next. So let's go with some effective interventions that have been reported by some medical studies or clinical studies. In recruitment, I think it's key to always use bicultural or bilingual research assistants. That will facilitate the process of recruitment for the Hispanic population. Also building in prior relationships. Let's say you have already developed a established relationship with a church or maybe community events or maybe a group of people in a community. And then you want to build from that. You want to show up for the community when they need you, and then you can approach them with research, and that would increase your participation. Community partners and champions, it's really important to identify those individuals in the community and then use them to approach other patients. I cannot underemphasize like the bilingual communication, telephone reminders, emails, flyer, posters, informational material, everything needs to be in both languages. And if you are sure of a certain population or if the patient tells you that they only speak Spanish, then that's the language that all the communication should be on. And most recently, we have been using some digital marketing like Facebook, geotargeting, Google, and those have been novel and also important in recruiting patients. Now, when we go into now you recruit your patients, but how do we do to retain them in the clinical trial? How do you ensure that these patients are gonna be compliant and adhere to the treatments or to the clinical trials? So some interventions that had been effective are bilingual education and videos. Interactive videos work better than just a video that doesn't ask any questions to the patient. Another thing that I cannot emphasize enough will be the importance of using materials that have low literacy. For non-Hispanic patients, we also have to make sure that everything that we deliver in terms of informational material is going to be for low literacy. So the same needs to be done for Hispanic. Care coordination by patient navigation, they always help because actually the patients form a really strengthened relationship with the care coordinators and with the patient navigators. They reach them first than the PI or the research coordinator. Developing agreements is something that has been named as important for retain and adhere patients to clinical trials, but I feel that it depends on the trial. For some patients, agreements and signing agreements may be really scary for them. So if there is no need for them, then maybe for some specific trials you may use, maybe not for other ones. Increasing site visits and follow-up interviews is another important topic, because for some clinical research, some studies, the design is to follow up at 2 years. If we only do one follow-up every year, there is gonna be a much higher rate of losing patients during that time. So increasing the visits and the interviews are gonna be more really important. Also for the researchers, if they have more tightened and closing site visits, that will help for the researcher to keep up with the recruitment and the retention and adherence. Validate and update contact information for the patients. Hispanic population has been noticed to have a really high rate of mobility, and especially when there are specific populations like immigrant or migrants that are specifically the ones that are going into the crops and in the agricultural business. Validate and update. The contact information is gonna keep your patients enrolled, and weekly reminding phone calls that will help you know what is going on with your patients. Some studies have reported weekly homework assignments and content discussed, which for some patients may be motivational, but for some other ones may be not that motivational. So it will be important to maybe just determine how important it is for determine population. Next. Now here there are some reported barriers, and I'm not gonna spend a lot of time because I know that we have another speaker that probably is gonna touch on some of these, but they have been categorized usually in 3 different aspects. The society barriers, which are gonna be included the income and the cost. The lack of transportation is huge for the Hispanic population. The lack of child or elder care. If we don't have that, if we don't put it in our visits, then that may affect the possibility for these patients to come back for the subsequent visits. Inconvenience, where is located the site of the visit, and time demands associated with participation usually are a barrier. But there are other barriers that are related more to the participants' belief. For example, fear of adverse events of the medication that we are using if it is a clinical trial of intervention. Perception of the participants that they are being treated as guinea pigs. That's something that also happens in this population and in other ones too. The belief that there is a health-related fear. I don't want to participate because maybe I am going to be diagnosed with a disease that I didn't have it to start with. The beliefs in the religions. So some religions are really not bringing clinical trials or they don't understand really what the study is. And I have been in that position in that I have to talk to the pastor in order for my patient to be recruited. So that has to be having in consideration. Some other barrier-related participation beliefs, including the privacy concern, especially when there is problems with topics that are going to be private, and there may be concerns with that. For example, in adolescents, in which we are trying to investigate about sexually transmitted disease, that can be a problem, and the lack of, in general, interest in clinical trials. Finally, there are some participator-related barriers. For example, age. Children and adolescents may not be able to participate by themselves, right? They need to buy in the parents to bring them and agree with the trial for them to be in the trial. And some legal immigration status that always come up with this population. Next. Now, how we can overcome some of those barriers. So for example, for the distrust or fear of clinical trials, then not only that involves the staff and the providers, but also unsafe treatments or even the the fear of adverse events of being in the intervention group and then maybe having adverse events, or fear of immigration status or being discriminated just because of their race and ethnicity. So some solutions that some have used is establishing that trust with the research staff, using the community partners that, as I mentioned before, and incorporated cultural values into every material that we are going to discuss with them. Finally, familism, which is a term that is really interesting, and it is just bringing the family to. So you are enrolling a pediatric patient, but you really are enrolling the whole family. Regarding the lack of clinical trial awareness, education is key, and all education, as I mentioned before, should be in the primary language, culturally appropriate, and at the level of the health research literacy. And finally, regarding the lack of clinical trial access, it's very important that we train other physicians as primary investigators, bilingual physicians as primary investigators. And also, it's very important that primary physicians believe in the process. Otherwise, your patients may start but may not continue. Next. Other barriers that we can address with different interventions are, for example, with the Affordable Care Act, the Hispanic healthcare was improved, but as many of us know, we that work with patients know that gaps remain, and coverage gaps are really important in these states that have not expanded Medicaid. Just now, right after COVID, many people fell off with Medicaid, and those are going to be the ones that are not going to have access. If they don't have access to go to the regular doctor, the pediatrician, then they are not going to be eligible, or they are not going to have access to get into these clinical trials. And then for healthcare providers, it will be really important to improve the language and cultural barriers with the Hispanic patients through training opportunities, just like this seminar does, just like this wonderful organization is doing, supporting diversity and healthcare staff, and also addressing implicit bias between us and not only providers, but also our staff. And sponsors must also do their part to improve diverse trial participation. There are maybe some other things that they can do to include patients. And you know, I am one of those those investigators that if the materials are not in Spanish, I don't sign for the trial, because I really think that it's important that I offer them, my Hispanic patients, the same offers that I do to the other populations. Next. And then finally, the conclusion. It's very important that we prioritize diversity in clinical trials, and that should be our goal, to provide the most effective treatments for Hispanic population. And by the way, we all need to be aware that by the year 2050, which is not that far, then our Hispanic population is really gonna make up 1/4 of the US population. So we need to improve now so we can provide better care to these patients in the future. And then lastly, there appears to be no universal strategy to improve recruitment and participation of Hispanic into research, but a combination of key elements from several strategies will be the best to include more patients in research. And with that, I conclude my part of the presentation.
Thank you, Dr. Espinoza. Very, very comprehensive. And I can see that you're very in tune with your patients and get them all into clinical trials. Next, we're going to hear from Dr. Bernardo Ng, who's the medical director and co-founder of the Sun Valley Research Center Incorporated in the San Diego area. Dr. Ng, do you have slides? There they are. You're on mute, Dr. Ng.
Thank you, Dr. Rios. Well, it's gonna be a hard act to follow after Dr. Espinoza's presentation, but I'll do my best. There are some things that are in common between my presentation and hers because we're working with the same population. I'm going to try to highlight our experience here on the other side of the country. I'm in California, and I want to thank you for this invitation and really excited about this initiative. Hopefully, people who are connected can be excited and encouraged about working with the Hispanic participants. Okay, location. We are in California, in Imperial Valley. That's the furthest southernmost county in California in the southeast corner right here. We have Mexico to the south. We have Arizona to the east. We have San Diego to the west, and we have the Salton Sea in the north. The population is about 180,000 people. We have 82% Hispanic presence, which is double that of the average in California, which is about 44, 45. The main labor is agriculture, or at least how it originated. The high school dropout rate is 25%, which is one of the highest in the state as well. And of course, there's a lot of speaking Spanish people. I have a photo here of the Imperial County Public Health Department and one of the prisons in the state, which amount for the other two out of the three highest employers besides agriculture. This is to show you the test scores in Imperial County are really low. Only here you have the images. This is mathematics. The darker blue is for elementary school. The lighter blue is for middle school. It's only 3%, and it's 8% at both levels for reading. So this already tells you or highlights something that Dr. Espinosa also mentioned about the importance of communicating what clinical trials are about, the risks, the safety measures at a level that will be understood by our Hispanic patients. This is another one of the employers. The irrigation district takes care of the power and the water in the county. So we have manufacturing, agriculture, but there's a lot of poverty, migration, and in fact, in 2009, El Centro, which is the largest city in the county, was the poorest city in the country. So our challenges, and I want to stick to these three, which I think are the ones that sound or make more noise in our environment. They're not the only ones, but these are the three we've been working on. Lack of awareness. Most of our patients don't know what clinical trials are. And as Dr. Espinosa mentioned, there's this risk of misperception. As it is, they're scared to go to the doctors. The idea of participating in a clinical trial is even scarier. And the last thing, logistics, which they were already mentioned by Dr. Espinosa. Our ecosystem here is such that we have a spread out county. The cities can be 30 to 35 miles apart, and there is no public transportation. So we have to be sure that we provide that for those who are interested in participating. And transportation is one thing, making it on time to their visits, especially with the pediatric population, because we need to accommodate to their schedules. They need to be in the afternoon, the visits, so they can make the appointments. And this is how we present in our website. Why should I participate in a clinical trial? So we tell them that it's convenient. They can get full evaluations. There's no cost. If they're not insured, we're still going to see them. And even if they don't end up qualifying for a clinical trial, they already got an evaluation by specialized staff and got lab work done and even EKGs and things like that. We want to make it clear that they get compensated. And this is very important because at first glance, it could be taken as, oh, you know, how can you participate fairly if you're getting paid for participate? No, I think this is an ethical debate that has already been clarified. People who participate in clinical trials have their own occupations. They're donating their time, and this is only a fair compensation. Any of the activities, none of the activities will be at any cost. And probably the most important, and from our end, our experience has been something that is probably underestimated in the past, is a chance to contribute to science, to the advancement of healthcare. And you know, not only with adults, but also with children. I think among Hispanics, there's this altruistic streak. It's probably part of our culture, or I don't know where it comes from, but when you know that even if you turn out not to have the right diagnosis, or even with the possibility that you're going to be on the placebo arm, and even the possibility that you may have side effects, the fact that you can contribute to science for other Hispanic people in the country has turned out to be very valuable. So we make sure we tell them that. And also the goal, we make it very clear, because early on we said, you know, there's a chance you can get treated, and, you know, something that you have not been able to be, you haven't been able to address from your previous doctors or previous visits or clinics, maybe we can figure it out here. We're very open and very clear, saying, you know, that the main goal of clinical trials is to collect data, as well as we make it very clear that going through the clinical trial has many more safety measures than getting typical clinical care. And that's even without adding the fact that many of the FDA approved medications are approved on clinical trials that happen in samples with very few Hispanics or Latinos. So we try to show both sides, the advantages and disadvantages, as well as the potential benefits and risk. Okay, and of course, I think I'm just going to leave that image over there. Dr. Espinosa already mentioned about the importance of having a bilingual team of people working, so that whenever the patient feels that it's more convenient to speak in Spanish, we can offer that. Okay, and now I'm going to show you pretty much so you get an idea of how many patients we have to contact or pre-screen so that we can succeed on recruitment. I want to share some numbers of actual studies that we've carried in the last 12 months. So we participated in one for autistic spectrum disorder, irritability. Cariprazine is a medication that's already approved for other indications. We had to pre-screen over 550 potential participants. Of course, it was their parents that we talked to, so that we could screen 9 of those. 5 were screen failures, the other 4 were randomized, but of all of those, 8 were of Hispanic or Latino background. Then we have an ADHD study on children and adolescents with guanfacine. That's a very old medication, very safe, has shown to be very novel. Well, with that, it took us over 1,000 pre-screen calls to get 6 patients to be screened for the study. 2 failed, 4 were randomized, and all of the 6 were Hispanic. We have a migraine study with lasmiditan. This is a medication that has not been approved yet, and we had to pre-screen over 100 people, potential participants, only to get 3 screens, and of those, no one was of Hispanic background. And that's very interesting, because it's not that migraine does not happen in Hispanic children, but probably the reason was fear of participating. And then we have another with children, same experience. It's been very hard. That's a newer medication, Trokendi extended release. We have another study of ADHD for children with centanafidine, almost 500 calls to be able to screen 9 people. And of those, 9 were of Hispanic background. Only 3 were randomized, and only 3 completed. And finally, an ADHD study with adolescents on the same molecule, 692 calls, so we could get 4 screening visits, of which 3 failed, but the 4 of them were Hispanic. So I want to highlight the fact that it takes a lot of patients contacted, potential participants contacted, before we can get an actual a screening visit and an actual randomized patient. Dr. Espinosa already talked about social media. We do a lot of community outreach, and then we post it on our social media. So if you see to your far right, that's part of our staff participating in health fairs. And then number one and number two, I give you examples of posts that we do in Spanish and also posts that we do in English. All these have to be IRB approved. Well, not the post about the health fairs, but the ones about specific studies. Okay, so in my conclusions, recruiting Hispanic and Latino children and adolescents is both challenging and necessary. Increased awareness is key to clinical trials acceptance. Parents need to be comfortable with safety issues. That's obviously very important. Contributing to science is more valuable than you would think. And for any pre-screening, from pre-screening to completion, it takes a team, and this is our team. And I want to highlight the fact that we all have Hispanic background. Everybody speaks Spanish and English, and we really like what we do. Thank you.
Yeah, I'm asking.
Wait a minute. Sorry. Oh, okay. Thank you, Dr. Ng. So, I want to invite everyone on the call to send in your questions to the Q&A box. I did see a few mentions of I'll just say of curiosity and also interest in the whole issue of pediatrics and clinical trials. But there was one issue that came up a couple of times, and that was mental health. And Dr. Ng, because you are the specialist here on mental health, could you tell us, when you have a pediatric patient that's interested in clinical trials, but you know that they have a mental health background, what is it is there some triaging that you do to allow them to come into clinical trials? Do you have to talk to the parents? How do you deal with, and let's say adolescents that could act out and, maybe not be compliant with clinical trials? How do you help the process, or how do you have your staff help the process to make sure that the families understand the importance of coming back to collect data, to have a patient that might have some accommodations that you have to do because they have some mental illness that is maybe medically treated, but again, it could be a kind of a dicey situation.
Yes, so I'm a psychiatrist, first of all. So my staff is very used to working with such population. Sun Valley Research Center was founded in 2008 and is the sister to Sun Valley Behavioral Medical Center that was founded in 1998. So actually, the outpatient clinic is the source of a lot of the participants. And what we do there, when we find that a patient could benefit from participating in a trial, or we have the right trial for the patient that I have in front of me, we already have a process where I just let my staff know, you know what, I already talked to Juan and his parents, and they would like to learn more about whatever trial. And we already have a process where they move to a separate side of the building where they get explained right away at the moment, right? Mm-hmm. Now, when we talk about the community, part of the strategy that I didn't mention is that we visit doctors, in this case, pediatricians, and we go back at least quarterly to update them on what studies we have. And it's very interesting. Some of them are really open to it. Some of them even allow us to have our staff visit. We write memorandums of understanding so that they let us look at their records, or we have staff there really fast if they have, I have a question on this patient who might be interested. So we try to respond really fast, but then the challenge is for them to remain interested. So for us, the key is that the first thing is the parents need to be safe about the whole process. So once they do that, then we go with the child or the adolescent, where they won't necessarily want to participate, right? So we try to keep an environment which is not boring. We keep them busy. We give them crayons and where they can draw and write. With adolescents, it's sometimes tougher. So we had one in the past with migraine. We did okay, but for example, ADHD, we try to go keep a very fluent visits because they get bored really quickly and want to leave. And some of the visits get very long. I do my assessments, and then they have to get their blood drawn. They get to get an EKG. They get weight and measured. So they become long visits. So we try to keep them busy, occupied, and comfortable. But they are definitely a greater challenge than recruiting adults.
Yes. Dr. Espinoza, there's a question about virtual interventions. And, with the COVID-19 pandemic, we've now become a lot more used to using telemedicine, telehealth. Can you tell us how you have been able to use virtual or telemedicine with your clinical trial protocols?
Yes, and as a matter of fact, a lot of sponsors for clinical trials for medications, for example, for antibiotics or antimicrobials, they prefer to use some type of platform where the patients can put like the adverse events and things like that, right? And we also can do a lot of follow-up that way. And I'm going to tell you that I believe that these interventions are not for everybody. There are some patients that will love them, especially the youngest ones, right? The mom that has 5 kids and maybe don't have time to go there, but she can jump in the phone and get a telehealth visit. But there are some other ones that they don't like it. So we need to be mindful of that. Those interventions may not work for everybody. But you're right. Since COVID, we all are being more aware that they exist. We are more comfortable speaking in the phone than we used to do before. And I think that as long as your patients have good relationship with you and they trust on the system, they may be willing to do some of those visits or some of those interventions or interactions that you need through that way. But I think it's not for everybody. But we
Okay.
just, we just go with the flow, with the ones that like it.
So let me, I was just told my questions or my comments aren't going to everyone. I'm sorry about that. Let me remind everybody that we would like your questions for the panelists to go to the Q&A box at the bottom of your screen. And we do have a few more questions. One question to Dr. Ng is, are you working with the medical school? I know UC San Diego and
Yes.
San Diego State University are very interested in clinical trials, and didn't know how you as a private doctor, in the community, how you connect to the medical school.
Yes, we're very open. We're a small organization, so it's easy to get paperwork through our system. Right now, we're with the USC dementia project, and on the clinical side, we have rotations for the nurse practitioner mental health and psychiatric program from the UC system, which began at UCF, but now it includes all the UCs in the state. And yeah, we're open. We've also been a site where we get IMGs to rotate. So those who are interested in going into psychiatry residency, we've done very well in the last 2 years. We had 6 physicians visiting, and they all matched either in psychiatry, one of them in pediatrics, another one in internal medicine. So yeah, we're pretty open, and we welcome people to come in. If there's a university interested other than the ones we're working with, we can talk. You can rotate here if you want.
And just to let you know, a young doctor, a pediatric resident, is actually looking to work in a private office after graduation and try to learn how to set up a research project. I think that's the kind of young people that we're looking for to be in our mentoring program. And I know someone else mentioned, why don't we work with the PhD students. Great idea. And Dr. Espinoza, Dr. Ng, either of you, can you tell us how we might reach more PhD and residents? It's just so hard because we're just out in social media in general, and our databases are usually doctors that are already out of school, but we need to reach the next generation. Any ideas?
Well, okay, so I want to be very clear that I'm not affiliated with any school per se, like to come and do a postdoc. We don't qualify for that. But if you want to come on your own time and see what we're doing, you're welcome. On the pediatric resident, I don't know if you're licensed in California, but if you want to have a practice right away, come to Imperial County. My God, you're gonna have people knocking your door right away. And if besides that, you want to do clinical trials, we are in a moment of expansion where we're going out of the central nervous system field, and both for children, adults, and older adults. So that part we should talk.
Dr. Rios, I do wanna maybe put the seed here about the section of international medical graduates through the American Academy of Pediatrics. I used to be a member, executive member there, and they do a lot of work with the international medical graduates. So that may be another way, another platform that the organization gets more, more people interested. I know
Yes.
that a lot of, just young graduates, right, that just came to or just come to the United States trying to get their testing done and everything, like get the US Meli, they may reach to this section for information. And I think that partnering with them will be beneficial for both groups. And I can, I can send you the person to contact, so you have that information. But it is through the
Right.
American Academy of Pediatrics.
Okay, no, great, thank you. And our sister organization, the National Hispanic Medical Association, is developing a council of IMGs. We have a council of residents and fellows and a council of young physicians. And we have had IMG doctors at our conferences and chapter meetings. And yes, there's a lot of interaction between our members and IMGs. We just need to, and maybe on the NHHF side, figure out how to help them with the research. And I do know that they can get visas and be supported by we're a 501c3 organization. So if anybody out there has an IMG interested, an international medical doctor interested in research, we'd be happy to connect and learn how we could be of service and be a resource, which is what we're trying to do. We don't want to do the training. We want to be a resource for those who are doing the trainings of clinical research in our communities. So a few more questions, and if you both want to answer, it's what's been your experience with e-diary compliance among Hispanic parents, and what advice could you provide? And if you could explain what that is, I'm not a pediatric or a practicing doctor.
Go ahead, Dr. Espinoza.
Yeah, the e-diaries are, and usually how I work with them, how I tell, parents is that they are platforms, like web platforms, where the patients can get connected through different devices. Most of them nowadays use their own phone, and they get connected to the web platform from the sponsor company, and then in there they can put like all what happened in the day. If there is a new symptom when they are taking any medication, then they can put it in there. And I am gonna tell you, I feel that the best way for people to get those e-diaries filled is really if you put some small token of appreciation connected to it. Because most of the trials, they make you, they only give you compensation for your time, right? And so
Uh-huh.
if you come to the place, then you will get a, so like a gift card or whatever it is that they are offering to the research participants. But for the e-diaries, many don't. And so we have also put that in our budget, that we really want to make sure that these parents actually get
Yeah.
some type of compensation, because that's time that they have to
It's a
use.
lot of time, yes.
Yeah, and so that's how I get it, like more compliant, my patients, if
Good.
I do that.
Well, that's great. I think here's another one, another question. Dr. Ng, a medical Spanish interpreter works for a medical center and wants to know, and it may be Dr. Espinoza too, about using Spanish translators and do you, or translation material. Do you do outreach and reminder for appointments in Spanish as well?
Totally, totally. I want to add that our experience with e-diary is very, very similar with Dr. Espinosa just described.
Mhm.
They're really hard, I just want to say. And sometimes the whole trial can fail, the subject's participation can fail just because of that, right?
Oh.
So very important. And we do something very similar to what she was saying. As to the Spanish translation, that is very interesting because in our area, or rather at our site, is not such a big issue because we're all bilingual. But I have colleagues here who, we have some doctors who are not Hispanic. And oh my God, but usually the support staff, if they're local people, most people here are bilingual. But I can imagine that in other sites, bigger ones, where the staff may not be bilingual, definitely translators or interpreters are needed. And very similar to what Dr. Espinosa said in her presentation, we're not as radical as not signing a contract if the materials are not available in Spanish, but we do say that we cannot promise, the recruitment they expect, and sometimes they still, want to do the trial with us, because it varies considerably our potential results if we cannot recruit in Spanish with Spanish materials.
Right. I think that's so important to, especially to the patients. But another question similar to this is for those doctors who are not Spanish speakers, what would you suggest besides bilingual staff? Have you used any of the, translation lines or anything like that you think makes sense for clinical trials?
Well, we haven't, but let me tell you, I used to work at a detention center for people who were getting deported. And it's so impressive. I mean, the ecosystem is dominated by people who either spoke English or spoke Spanish. But for someone who's bilingual, whenever you face someone who doesn't speak either language, oh my God, it's really paralyzing. So I got the experience of our colleagues who are not Spanish speaking. And at that moment, anything that can help helps. Like, we've used the AT&T translation service, and I don't have much experience with AI or automated translation services. I'm sure they're going to be not as efficient as a human, but I think that it's inevitable that they're going to come into this environment as well, if they're not already doing it in other sites.
And Dr. Espinoza in Florida, what is your experience with so many Spanish speakers and not enough Spanish speaking doctors, or I shouldn't say just doctors, but staff involved in clinical trials?
Yeah, so I have been blessed that in every place where I am doing my clinical trials, I have some of at least one person that speaks Spanish, because that's so important. I just cannot imagine, right, like trying to do this and enrolling patients in that are Hispanic without having the proper staff. So, you know, it facilitates for me because obviously I speak also Spanish. So they do feel that they are less threatened when you don't use your translation or another person. They trust you more than if you use a translator. And so even if it is only one person in the group, but it is very important to make sure that you have it.
Yeah.
Because then they have that connection. When nobody in the team speak English, Spanish, I think that is very hard. I had that experience when I used to work in Kentucky. I was the only one that spoke Spanish. And so all my research coordinators were spoken English, but then I did the surveys that we needed to do. I did it myself because first it was easier, and second, the patients trust me, and then it was a lot simpler than trying to get one of these other ways of communication.
Do you think that the sponsors, the pharma companies, for example, who provide funding for clinical trials, would they develop support for bilingual staff, for example, or AT&T lines in clinical trial sites where there aren't any bilingual staff, to be able to pay for them or pay for the service?
That is a very good question. I'm not sure because obviously I am on the other side, right? The good side. But I will think that they may not just, those may be the sites where they are just gonna not include a variety or not include patients from Hispanic background, and they just know it and they will not do it. I think because I don't think it is. A lot of them are gonna be willing to go in through extra cost when there is nobody that is gonna support that in the team, right?
Well, I would say thank you, Dr. Rios, for the idea, and I think we should push for this all together. Because yeah, your thinking is always ahead of us. But yeah, I think we should be able to somehow, because I agree with Dr. Espinosa, they probably don't care, but we should push it to make it a point that those sites like ours should be paid better, number one. And number two, that the areas the areas where like you were describing in Kentucky, where there are Hispanic people residing there, that if they want to expand their ability to recruit a more diverse population, that should be on the contract as an option. And there may be sites that are not interested, they're doing great and they don't need anymore. But for those who are trying to transition into being able to recruit a more diverse population, that they should have that the option of a greater benefit that way.
Yeah, I can't agree more. And just a last question, one of the things that we have to do as an organization is develop information in a toolkit. And just to ask if you had something that you think needs to be in a toolkit for the young investigators interested in helping to recruit more Latino pediatric patients into their clinical trials. We'd like to know what are some of the best things that could be done. And I know, Dr. Espinosa, let me start with you. You had a lot of ideas, a lot of things, a lot of experience. But what do you think is maybe the top number 1 and 2 type of interventions?
I'm sorry, to
recruit the Latino students into your clinic, the Latino patients into your clinical trials that are pediatric. You mentioned a lot of important interventions that overcome barriers.
Yes.
But if we had to describe some, let's say, promising solutions that would work for everybody, the top 1 or 2 priority interventions, what would you say would be more important? Just to be fundamental in any clinical trial reaching pediatric Latinos.
Yeah. I think that my staff must speak Spanish also. I think that that's the most important one, because then you will get, and then this alliance with the community partners. If you can
Okay.
get them, and if you can get the primary physicians, the pediatricians, then you'll have a successful recruitment. If you don't have that, it's hard.
Yeah. And Dr. Ng, what do you think with the,
Yes, I
from
would.
from the psychiatric and mental health side, what do you think works?
I was just
Yes.
laughing because I would put on the opening of the toolkit, be patient and don't give up. That's gonna be the first thing. And the next thing is it takes a team. It takes a team. And if the team is bilingual, even better, but it does take a team. It's a lot of work behind, prior to the screening and the follow-up, and then in keeping that relationship for afterwards. So it's a lot of roles to play. So those would be my two things.
Okay. One last question that I see that we haven't answered yet, and that's about genomics. Genomic testing and genetic testing in clinical trials. I know that the All of Us research program is providing that to the researchers, and to the patients. But have you been involved with any of genetic testing yet? And if so, what can you say about what you're doing or learning about it?
Well, I have, and I didn't mention it because it was not a pediatric trial. It was an adult, very clever. I hope there's going to be something in the future. As you know, we've been able to do genetic testing already for the ability to metabolize psychiatric medications, but that has really not helped much other than learning about the tolerability of the medications, not the efficacy. So this one included patients who are already under treatment. They took the sample and then they're crossing it with their state of their depression and what medications they're taking. So the next step will be that the genetic information is not only going to tell you if they can tolerate the medication, but hopefully under what genes, what medication work better. So hopefully we can get efficacy with that. And it was not very non-invasive because the treatment didn't change. It was just the blood and saliva collection. And it was a very easy test. We got over 200 people that it was one visit. They came, give the sample, answer some questionnaires, and got paid and left. And they were very happy to be participating for the future understanding of depression and antidepressants. So we really did well.
That's great. And I say one last question, but I see one more that I didn't ask, and that is about your outreach. You mentioned health fairs to find community people that are outside of your clinics or outside of your academic centers. What other places are good to find people in terms of clinics? Community to do more marketing so that others hear about it. Places where there are lots of people. Besides health fairs, where else in communities have you had success?
Churches. They
Churches.
yes.
Yes.
And I'm telling you, sometimes I have to talk to the pastor, to the religious leader for my patients to participate. Otherwise, and it takes me an extra hour, but then they are fine if they are fine.
Okay. And you, Dr. Ng, any?
No, we've done like nursing homes and community centers.
Uh-huh.
And that's to focus on our older adults studies.
Yeah, no, that's great. It's very important to share your knowledge because you're living the dream to create diversity in clinical trials, both of you. And I really want to thank you for all your ideas and your slides, and want to tell the audience that again, we will have the slides and the recording of this webinar available in a week on our website, which is nhmafoundation.org. And just some updates here. We have a new webinar tomorrow for another program that we run. We have a diversity in public health workforce for looking for ways to outreach to African Americans, Latinos, and Native Americans to work in the public health system of the future at the local level, state level, or federal level. So we're having a very important discussion tomorrow by an expert, dean of one of the local law schools here, but it's a Supreme Court decision on the use of race-conscious admissions and the impact to public health schools and the options for compliance. And so we'd like to invite everybody here to join us tomorrow at 2:00. And there's an RSVP link there. And Dr. Ng, I see that you have to leave, and Dr. Espinoza, again, thank you very much. This is a very worthwhile webinar. We have a survey. I'd like everybody that's still on to please answer the survey. And here's the QR code. And we will be emailing all of the registrants and participants to get your comments. And I want to thank our staff, Viviana and Guillermo, who helped tremendously with this webinar. And we have another QR code here. We're all into QR codes now for sponsorship opportunities, mentorship, and our programs, and just to donate to our foundation. Our National Hispanic Health Foundation has the largest scholarship in the country that we give to Latinos that are in medical school, dental, nursing, pharmacy, PA, and public health. And we really want to help our next generation. And this webinar series is really about getting more young people to think about going into clinical research as a career. And this one was for pediatric patients, but we have different topics, and I welcome you to join us at our next one. We have them quarterly, so the next one will be in August. And look forward to meeting you, and thank you all again for joining the National Hispanic Health Foundation and our National Center for Hispanic Health Research. And there's another Elena Rios there that I see is Mr. Guadalupe Pacheco. Did you want to tell us who the speaker is tomorrow? You're on mute.
No, I think you already did, Lena, but it's Dr. Matthew, and she's renowned kind of civil rights advocate for health equity. As a matter of fact, she's developed like maybe 3 health equity clinics during her career.
Okay.
And she's very passionate about how to tie law and public health together.
What is the people are asking how to RSVP? Is there a
Yeah, there's a link right there, the previous kind of slide.
can you put that slide back, Viviana?
The next, go ahead. There it is, right there.
Okay, there's the RSVP link. If
Right there.
let's see if I click on it, will it show? No, doesn't work for me. It doesn't work.
Doesn't work. Oh,
No.
they can.
Is it on our website?
Yes.
The NHMAfoundation.org website.
Yeah.
And is it programs? NHMA Foundation.
Yes, it should be on the programs.
Programs. And it is our public health diversity
Yes.
program. And a very important webinar tomorrow.
Yeah.
So.
And it's free.
And it's free. Yes. But we'll test you afterwards.
Yeah.
But anyway, thank you all very much. And we look forward to continuing to work in clinical research and increasing the number of Latinos that are not only patients, but are the actual researchers. And you don't have to be a doctor. You can be a PhD, you can be a community health worker, you can be a nurse. We need a whole team in our clinical trial sites across the country. Thank you very much. See ya.